if you would ask, oh, cool, cool. A few years ago, if you were to ask, um, you might have somebody might be formatting metadata in maybe iTunes or some different software, but at least within the licensing space, I feel like a lot of things are leading towards disco, which is becoming more of, in my opinion, at least more of the standard as far as sync is concerned. That's not the only source of metadata outside of sync, and people are also using private third party platforms to just do metadata, and even I'm an Ableton user, but I believe Logic. You can actually write the metadata directly from the DAW. Somebody might correct me if I'm wrong. One of the main DAWs does that.
So
Um,
what we've been hearing, or we've been talking internally about it, because I don't think you can write directly on a WAV file, or it's more complex than writing certainly in an MP3.
um, I'm not sure how Logic works in terms of whether it does it differently based on one file format, or whether AIF versus WAV. I do know that um, whatever you write to, if you write, it's preferable to write it to an AIFF or an MP3 because those are going to retain the metadata information, and Wave may lose the metadata information. So somebody uploads it, downloads it, and you think the metadata is in there, even if you created it with something that says I'm writing this to the Wave file. I don't believe that the wave file is going to always keep that metadata, and you could definitely lose the information. So
So
that's
that's
something.
Yeah, that's a tricky conversation for us because we want us to be able to supply the best audio standard we can, but WAV is better than MP3 as far as sound, but if we can't store the metadata, then we have to figure out an alternate plan for making sure it gets tagged. And then, we're also sharing these playlists now of artist music that are on the platform. Those go to disco and then they go all around. Like, I mean, so that might need to be something we talk about internally is maybe as far as the playlists and managing that metadata.
Yeah,
Um,
that's something to test, I think, and because even with Ancestry, I made a decision at one point to only, excuse me, accept AIFF submissions for that reason. I was worried about losing the metadata, but I know there are plenty of other agencies that accept WAV files, and sometimes some of them exclusively. That's all they accept, and so they're probably if you're downloading it directly from Disco, whatever format you're downloading in, it's probably worth testing that the download contains all of the metadata, no matter what format you're getting. I suspect it's not the initial transfer, but that it's when you take it from one system and then move it to another system, that if it's wave, that it's more likely to be lost in transit than AIFF or MP3.
right, right. Cool. Well, I don't want to make everybody fall asleep, but with all the technical conversation. So Eric, in your mind, what is the most popular BPM?
72 or 144 if you're doing trap music.
Okay, there you go. You heard it here, folks.
You
Okay,
didn't think
but
I was
for
going
a
to have an answer for
commercial
that, did
aspect of it,
you?
for a commercial aspect of it, and Sam, please speak to this as well. What's some of the sort of do's and don'ts of either licensing music, syncing music, uh, placing music rather. You know,
Oh,
thoughts, feelings, impressions.
so say that again. For commercial music, what are the do's and don'ts of licensing for writing? Oh, there could be so many. I guess from a writer's perspective, um, and we were talking about kind of sync songwriting, so I'll weave that in. I'll say 90% of the songs that we write as writers are love songs, romantic songs, and that's probably the least requested music that I see, and from any briefs that I receive. And so most artists when they're saying, "Hey, I feel like I have the perfect stuff for sync or that can be licensed," but the majority of the catalog is what we're normally used to seeing, which is romantic songs. Um, I think that's the biggest gap because if you haven't been studying what's actually used in the commercials and what's used, even on television, even in romantic shows, most of the things are covering all the other emotions from joy to guilt to anger to rat. Like there's so many other emotions outside of love, and those are usually the ones that I think most people have the harder time finding because there's love songs anywhere. But I'll pass that to Sam as well to get your thoughts because you're probably looking for that all the time.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of what I listen or look for ends up being vocal, so mostly just instrumental, which does make a really big difference when you are looking for something with lyrics because they add that layer of complexity of like, do the lyrics match the what the video's about, where sometimes the beat matches or the tone and the mood and the atmosphere matches, and then the words are just like, actually, that's not what this is about. Um, I think a big thing is variety within the track is a big one that I look for because
Hmm.
music is really good for the turning points in videos, in stories of not just having one ambient track in the background, which is something that you can produce, but I think a lot of people want to make and want to use things that have ups and downs. And so one of the big things in searching is just looking at the waveforms and seeing like, is there a pattern? Is there a dip? There a dropout? And having those sort of things that add variety to the track, and you can be like, this section loops for a while, but I know I can use this section for the upbeat part and this section for the downbeat part, and I know there's a bridge in between them.
So
That's
you're
awesome.
That's really interesting. So you're talking about a way to sort of move the visual narrative forward with music, tying that in, and moving the story forward with music and the video. But you don't need the lyrics for that. And then using the transitions in a piece of music for visual transitions.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Huh.
And
Okay, so
lyrics
that's really
definitely
different. That's really different than what I do. I mean, I love lyrics, but so this is kind of killing me right now.
lyrics are and a lot better for film, like if for advertising, like usually you have a person talking.
Yeah.
And you're not going to want to have lyrics because they're going to want to compete with them, or you're going to want to have lyrics that blend in the background. But when you have something for film, or you have something that's more story driven and you can step back from the narrative of talking and sit with the song and have the song motivate it, then yes, the lyrics are great. And that is also where you really do have to start looking at like, I want to see the lyrics written out so that I can feel what the song is doing, but I'm also making sure it's not putting a completely different message out for someone who is more lyric driven.
Yeah.
Sam, is your world 100% ads? I know you did say in the beginning it might also be other things, but is it mostly ads?
Currently it's mostly ads. I've worked in a lot of things. I did film school, so I have film background. Um, I'm I work on audio dramas, but those are tend to be very spoken, so you don't want to be competing with the music. You want the music to be emphasizing that. Um, but yeah, a lot, especially with color, a lot of the work I do is advertising.
So do you and are you this and this is something I've always been curious about and I think a lot of people on the music side are not aware of but with your clients in color specifically, are you the primary music decision maker or are you working with like a supervisor with your clients in most of the roles? How does that work?
Yeah, it's usually in the ideal world, like yes, the editor and the creative side would want to be the chooser of the music track. Usually we end up selecting four or five and sending them. Sometimes like yeah, it's dependent on the client. I've definitely had clients where they're just like, here's the genre I want, or here's an example of the sound I want, and as long as you find something similar to that, they'll like it. The big thing is music is very early on in the process, which I think is different from having something custom scored and like going in at the end because the music is so crucial to how the emotions of the piece work out that yeah, you don't want someone saying at the last minute, I actually think we should put a different song in. It happens. I've definitely had to do that before, and it is definitely painful.
I think that's really insightful because we're on our side where we sit. Usually, most songwriters and producers, and probably many of the creators who are here, we know music supervisor, and that's the only decision maker that we're aware of. And many of us don't have relationships with editors and realize just how much how embedded in the decision making process you are, that you're actually going through and listening to songs and thinking about the picture and the song and how um, those work. Is that, I mean, is that part, is that am I correct? Is that like embedded in your workflow, that you're looking at the picture and the music and trying to see what fits based on what I guess whatever parameters you've been given?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it is the combination of you want to edit the story together based on like what the narrative and what the audio is saying, and then you get the music and you're like, well, this has a beat that is faster
Yeah.
than what I originally edited, but it looks better to edit to the beat. So then you're changing the visuals to match the music. Sometimes you're changing the music to match the visuals. It's a very back and forth process. I had something I wanted to say and it's slipped my mind, but yeah, a big thing too is sometimes I can't. I don't know if everyone's this way, but sometimes I can't. I'll sample a song and be like, this sounds great. And I download it as a sample and you put it into the project and you put it with the voiceover, and you're like, oh, this doesn't work at all with these visuals. And so there's a lot of trial and error to that too.
So you said, Sam, you start with 4 or 5 songs. You'll pick 4 or 5 tracks, download them, and then weed it out. You obviously wouldn't do 4 or 5 mixes or edits to 4 or 5 different tracks. You try a little bit and then see what worked in there.
Yeah, usually
Okay.
I will download a couple songs and either you send it to client and client picks one and that's kind of what you're stuck with and you got to make it work. Or ideally, you download a couple and you try them out with some of a sample of the visual section you've worked
Right,
on,
right.
and see how that works. And usually, you can tell pretty fast if it's just not it's not working.
So what does your workflow look like in terms of discovery? I mean, in terms of, so when do you get a project? You get a project after the it's done being filmed. The cameraman, the director film it. Then they send you the rough footage. And at that point, you come in and you start looking over the whole piece and making notes, and then where do you go for music once you have that? I mean, what does your workflow look like from there?
Yeah, there are a couple stock sites. It really depends on price of the music, so I think having the price up front on this site is a really crucial thing there too, because we go to our subscription sites at work if there's not a big budget for music, and if there is a larger budget for music, you start going to sites that have listed prices for tracks and you start
Right.
downloading samples and trialing them. But I would say very early on, music is sometimes I will be doing a music search before we get the footage of just like we have a script, we know what people are going to say. You can at least find those 5 tracks. You won't know which one the right one is, but you can find them and get the general vibe. And that's always great to have in a site like this that has a similar songs to this button. Always great to see of if you find one that's the right vibe but doesn't match the beat perfectly, having that button to find other songs in the same genre is big step.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
Can
Well,
I
I
that's good
see
to
ask?
that
hear.
I see that we have a question in the chat. Just kind of want to make sure we get to that. El Corando, the excellent El Corando, is a complete song necessary, or are sequences of music more preferred? Thoughts from either of you?
From where I sit, I tend to deal more on the full song side, and so yeah, complete songs are usually required, often preferred. I don't necessarily deal in I don't deal or recommend to people just right, like, oh, I have a really hook in this, I saw this commercial and they had a really, really cool tagline, so I'm going to make a nice 15-second tagline, and that's it. At least with the things that the briefs that I normally see are asking for full, complete songs, even if that's going to get cut down to a 15-second spot or a 30-second spot. And even if they know they're probably going to use an instrumental, a lot of the briefs that I see are asking for um, full songs, primarily because those clients um, still want a story behind the song, the instrumental they're getting. They want to know that it comes from a certain artist, or maybe a certain independent artist, and there's a certain vibe going. And so it's interesting, even when they know that it's going to be instrumental or it's just going to be 15 seconds. The origin needs to be a full song from where I've been sitting.
So that's really interesting for me to hear because one of the conversations, a couple of conversations I've had with people in advertising has been around brands, and they were very interested that we were going to have artists forward-facing pages that they could look at. And there were two reasons why they were interested in that. And I suspect it aligns with kind of what you're saying too, like being able to get a feel of the overall story behind the piece that they were using. But the other two that were described was one, vetting the artist as human, which is another thing. That's another night. And then also vetting the artist brand. Like, is the artist, Johnny Rotten, or is the artist, Taylor Swift? I mean, what's going on here? Is that going to work for what I'm producing? Anyways, I digress a little bit, but I wanted to interrupt for that. Sam, did you want to comment about the full songs or the partial songs?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Eric. I think usually the full song is what is asked for, partly because it's easier to cut it down to something shorter than if you're given a 30-second part and they're like, I don't like this one section of it. You're like, well, it's not long enough for the song, for the piece anymore. But there is a place for sequences of music. I find I've often had to look on sound effect websites.
Hmm.
Um, if I want something short, like if you want a stinger or if you want like a couple seconds that leads a transition, uh, so there's definitely a place for it, and I don't think it's something that should be weighed entirely out. I think for advertising especially, it's more of the full
Yeah.
song. But like I've worked on podcasts that it's like, yeah, you need a 5 second transition between seconds or between sections of it, and it's hard to pull that out of a full song. Whereas if you have a full song that also comes with like this is the 15-second version, like sometimes that's really nice to have.
Uh,
I,
Great.
I
follow-up question.
so
Oh, follow-up question real quick. I'm getting through this chat thing, I swear. I'm on it. I got a job. What is the recommended length of an instrumental?
Um, wow. I feel like 3 minutes is a decent length, 1.5 to 3.
Yeah.
Um, like I said, sometimes there are things where you're looking for something really short, and I would treat that as something short and be a little differently, but usually 3 minutes is ideal because if it's a longer piece, if it's a 2.5 minute piece, like I said, you want to have a little bit that you can trim off of rather than trying to loop one section over and over again. If they're like, actually, can you add this section? Like, can you add 30 seconds? And be like, ah.
So, but that's at 72 BPMs. We all got to be clear on that.
uh, actually, well, there's so many interesting points. I will say that the if some of the larger like production music libraries, I supervised an audiobook this summer, and we pulled a lot of our music from APM and Universal. So, huge production libraries with lots and lots of cues. A lot of instrumental only cues, and then full songs, with stems involved. But a lot of what I saw in there sat between like, kind of like that 90-second, 2 minute mark when it was intended for instrumental only. But then if it had vocals on it, you always saw the 230 to 330 kind of time frame. But there, I feel like the tracks, the cues that you see that are instrumental only, they're clearly designed for that from the very beginning. I mean, many of them aren't in a verse chorus, format. They're kind of like 4 bar sections. So even in the 90-second cue, you've got all these 4 bar sections that are totally dynamic, so that like no 4 bars are exactly the same. So someone like Sam can take all these parts and kind of slice and dice and mix up these sections. And the ones that are good, they're able that you're going to get a full, hopefully a full story in that 90 to 120 seconds, where you've got the quiet piano only part, you've got the big climactic ending, you've got everything in between. But when it's fully arranged for verses, then you need something that feels more mainstream. I do want to jump, Danny. Something you said really jumped out at me, because I have I've been talking about the artist brand thing for a while, and how, especially over the last year or two, more and more briefs have been looking to the brand of the artist. So certain submissions want even like, let me see their Instagram pages as you're submitting, or what's their website as you're submitting the music, because they want to know that there's a story. But I have not seen yet, but I totally expect to, what you just said about, is this a human artist? And I just want to see this to verify that I'm getting something that's human. I think we're going to see a lot of that sooner than later.
It's funny because when I got excited about Incantio, it was very, very prosaic. It was like, well, it's a business platform. It's just to connect, artists on both sides to this marketplace and give them more control on both sides, more access to new music. But I think that sort of vetting is there's a couple different ways that we've been talking about approaching it, and one of those, I mean, you can talk about AI screening, you can talk about all these different ways of technologically going after some of this technology that's going to grind all the mills to a standstill pretty soon. I think there's much more interesting ways to talk about it. There's sort of human vetting. One of those is, the page, like having artist profile, having them write a bio statement, having a backlog of, of catalog. But the other ways are location, or who are the other artists and producers do they work with? I mean, you want to talk about human vetting, that's what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not really excited about having another social media platform. Ha ha ha. But what I am excited about is, all of these people that get together and do music together, do recording sessions together. And I'm sure it's very same, the same sort of thing for the film industry, Sam, with producers, cameramen. You end up with a certain product, you end up with a certain sound. And if I can lift that up and amplify that and vet these people at the same time, yeah, that's how I would rather do it. I mean, because we're not going to have time to listen, as Pete said earlier, like we're listening to the tracks now. Certainly when Pete does the playlist, we're not going to be able to do that, come next year when we come out of beta. It's so yeah, other ways. I had a question though, Eric, for you and Sam. So as we've been getting into building more playlists, uh, I've been really fascinated with the idea of how do we make it sort of subtitle the music out, and how important is it to have genre playlists?
How are you categorizing the playlist now? Just for context, if it's not by genre, what is it? What is it by?
I
Mood or?
No, we've started off doing either artist spotlight or label spotlight or regional. We had a regional there, or just I think our first one was like, here's some great tracks from some great artists that we're really excited about. Like, and it's all stuff obviously that we think has potential. Um, and with that little sort of asterisk of has potential, like everything has potential. Like I am not the gatekeeper. I am not the benchmark of like I think this is going to work, and I think that's not, because that's not what the service is for, nor is that what we're promoting. Nor am I on the other end licensing these things. I just here's a handful of things we like, and we want to share them and support the artists. And we're very aware of trying to be inclusive of everyone who's coming in and being
So,
part of
I
this.
mean, I think we featured Casper Baby Pants, one of the first artists who came on that had a very large back catalog and a big following. We featured, we're going to feature a couple labels that are coming up. Next year, we have a couple of legacy artists that are coming on that we'll feature just for fun with unreleased stuff that they've done. But I guess what Pete and I have been talking about is creating the landing page for people coming in and looking for music with these, genres. And then, so part of this question is, how do artists need to think about um, classifying themselves in genre? Is there an example? Is it disco, like the way they classify their music into genres? Is that a good template for artists if they're thinking about how to tag their music for genres?
Yeah, well, from my perspective, I mean, some of the main, Spotify and Apple, like I think they do a good job with like, not only capturing major categories but also staying on top of trends. Yeah, in terms of what's happening this summer and all the sub niches under pop and rock and everything that's breaking out. I for what I'm saying, I do most of the briefs I'm getting are in the ad space. A lot of times the briefs will what people are asking for kind of tells me what I need to put in the catalog, and it also tells me what I need to feature. And so, like with ads, two of the things that we've been getting a lot of requests for are you know more R&B in the ad space that we're seeing, especially like retro 60s soul, Memphis soul.
Really?
I'm doing whole
Yep.
collections
Okay.
now around
Mm.
like 60s Memphis soul and hybrid modern incantations of throwback retro soul. And so that will become a playlist, as we get enough of that content. So I think the demand fuels the playlist, and for artists who want to be in sync, then it's important to start like paying attention to trends the same way like people who work in the accessories field are always paying attention to like what's the Pantone color of the year, and like there's always trends in every industry. And so for this it's like watching iSpot TV and seeing what ads are happening and what genres are you hearing over and over and over. And like if you're watching truck commercials, you're going to hear rock, and it's still like Van Halen, and it's still 1970s classic rock. You know, so I think the briefs and the trends tell you what genres are there, and then you as an artist want to see, okay, if this is the world that I'm seeing, whether it's TV, because TV might be totally different from video games, and video games might be
Okay.
totally different from reality television, which might be totally different from, you know, procedurals. And so as you're seeing all these different worlds, you're identifying, oh, I think I could live here because that sounds close to kind of what I do.
Right. Right.
Then
Right.
you
Okay.
start building your collection and labeling yourself, accordingly, I think.
I think that would be a really interesting topic because I feel like it just for me as an artist, like there's a bunch of different ways I could classify my back catalog depending on what I had for breakfast, and that's probably not the most scientific approach. Um, Sam, how do you feel about that? About different genres, and how important is it when you're looking for music? Do you search by genre, or do you search by metadata, or
I definitely know that this one is very personal and opinion based because that's one of the reasons we have disagreements about like which stock site is preferred is it depends on who likes what type of searching. I
yeah?
tend to focus on mood or put a word like I don't know, like peppy or grungy as the main mood search and then filter by genre. Less so honestly, I feel like exclusionary filters are a little bit better than
Well,
because
that's
a lot
music to that's
That makes
music to
sense.
our
Yeah.
ears.
of
Yeah. Okay.
then as partly because from my understanding of genre as someone who's not a musician, like sometimes there are so many subgenres and I'm like I don't understand the differences, but I do understand what like heartfelt feels like compared to like epic. Um,
Yeah, yeah. So I was talking with a producer the other day, and oh, I can't remember who it was. Oh, I do not remember who it was. A very old friend of mine. Anyways, he was talking about working with clients, and they would say, "Well, I really want some wet reverb on the vocals." He's talking about this one particular singer he had, and but every time he would add more reverb to the vocal, she'd be like, "No, no, 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 that's not what I want." So she wanted the opposite. So you get when you do text prompts, you can. I mean, it sounds like you found the text prompts that work for you, like Peppy works for you, Grungy works for you, but there's still semantics in that kind
mhm.
of search engine. We should probably have a whole night on that because
Yeah,
I'm an English major and I'll go nuts on that.
I
But
think
it
that
is,
is, oh, sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think that's what having these like pre-curated some of the playlists is really useful for, is like even just a massive playlist that has the sort of vibe of like once I was looking for a skiing hype video and I was like extreme winter sports someone had made a playlist for and like that gets you far enough that I have a starting point and I can start filtering like oh I don't want this to be a rock winter sport or I want this to have more synths and like you can filter those but having those starting categories of even not just curated by the website, but curated by users or by the musicians who are like, I
Yeah.
think these songs go together. Sometimes we can't tell you why, but they have the same vibe. And if you find one that's the right vibe, you can usually find the others. But it is the really hard part is finding the right first search phrase, especially if you have a client who hasn't given you examples and has just given you words, and you're like, I don't really know what these words mean. And I show them to different people and semantically, like, they think they mean different things than I think they mean.
Yeah.
And then yeah, usually if I do pick 10 songs or 5 songs to send over, I try to find the 5 most different songs that still match the category. So if they're like, I don't like any of these, but this one's closest, then you can narrow it down.
Well, that's interesting to hear because a lot of the searching, like, our AI search is a big part of it similarity search. So you're
Hmm.
actually going the other direction, not looking for the differences between tracks. So that would almost be more of a manual search or a different prompt for that. So that's interesting. All right, we got to,
Thankfully, it's fairly easy to do that, though, Danny.
oh, you can
Typity
show me,
typity.
Pete. You can show me
Yeah.
tomorrow.
I'm
Uh,
just saying, our search functionality is very easy to use.
it is. It is. I don't want to undersell. Um, but I would like one thing I want to say, and we'll save this for a later topic, but we don't want to be a storefront catalog or a static catalog. So one of the things we're talking about bringing in next year is pitching on Incantio, having music supervisors, sync agents come in. They have their own page, and they can invite artists from Incantio to accept briefs. So we're looking at have some ways, creating more opportunity on Incantio in the next year, where we can get more sort of dynamic conversations going and give more opportunities to people.
That's great.
Lastly, we're running out of time, and I
And
hate
we
to
still
leave
have
questions
more
out.
questions.
We need questions. All right,
We
thank you,
still
Pete.
have questions. We had questions. We're going to
All
speed through
right,
them.
let's take some
I know we're
questions.
crunched for time.
Yes.
Thoughts on using stock instruments in DAW like Logic Pro or Ableton versus paying for instruments and sounds plugins? Thoughts either way. I have broken the brains of everyone.
Yeah. I think Eric froze.
He's contemplative. That's what that looks like to me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
let's pause on that one. We can move on to the next, specifically because it is a question for Sam. Have you found a good song, but it doesn't quite fit? So you reach out to the artist to consider a remix, like more synths, faster BPM, etc.
I've never had that experience. I would love that experience. I feel like part of it is like the search places that we have right now don't really offer that connection to the artist, which is something that I think is really interesting about this platform. Um, I also think it's always just a times thing. A lot of times, especially in advertising, they're just trying to turn it around so fast that like you
Yeah.
don't have time to make a remix. But I think that'd be very useful. And yeah, I think also in personal projects too, where like if you want to craft, I think film especially, film, audio drama, something that's a little more like emotionally driven, like having the ability to be like, okay, this is what the scene is doing. This is what I like about it. Like I miss that part from film school, and I think that'd be a really cool thing to integrate.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, absolutely. And then looks like our last question. How important then is a musician's description of a given track? Like I was feeling this, or here's the structure, or here's a list of instruments, etc.
Yeah, for me,
I mean, it's a lot of pressure on you because Eric is not here right now.
yeah, if it's taggable, filterable, and searchable, I would say it's important,
Yep.
especially for fast turnaround things. And this is another one that I'm like, I can only speak for me personally. I would love to see that information. I was feeling a big one. I think it adds a connection of sentimentality to the project of knowing like this is the feeling I got when making the song. This is the feeling like I would like it to represent. I've never seen that, so I at least not on the stock sites that we have used, so I can't say it's important to the decision-making process that has been there before. But from a personal standpoint, I think that would be a nice thing to have. I feel like a lot of content is just about speed and mass producing on some of these sites, so having something that really has that nuances.
Yeah,
And
I
I
mean that
think
would
it
make
was
sense, right? More engaging somehow. It makes it more
well,
real
and
somehow.
I think it was something you were saying a few minutes ago, Sam, about um, making the film, and it just that just struck me that oh yeah, like why wouldn't you as a filmmaker want to know like what story I was trying to tell with this piece of music or
Mhm.
how I was feeling? Because then it's like becomes faster even maybe to filter stuff out where it's like no, this is not aligned at all. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
Mhm.
I think that gets even deeper into the backstory of the piece and the artist and that more of that connection, which is really great. Something that we would like to have more on the platform. Do we want to ask Eric about the Ableton plugins versus what was that question?
Yeah. Mark had a question, Eric. Thoughts on using stock instruments in DAW like Logic Pro and Ableton versus paying for instruments and sounds plugins?
Oh, I'm all for stock sounds and plugins, and I've most of the time it's usually it's not the specific plugin or tool. It's knowing how to use it because you can get really high quality out of a lot of the stock stock things. I know Ableton very well, and Ableton stock plugins um, are great. So yeah, uh, now if you're doing specialty things like um, trailer production, where you're trying to get really really cinematic sounds, then you may have to invest in some specialty things that can get you those epic whooshes. And Sam mentioned earlier about going to like effects sites to get stingers and things. A lot of if you're doing high end ad production where it's really really dynamic and you've got slightly trailerized stuff and lots of cuts and edits and lots of sound effects, some of that you can do with stock, but some of the higher end stuff, especially big epic trailerized pop or anything that's going to be in like promos or uh uh trailerized remixes, then yeah, you'll need to pull in some other high end VSTs. Or if you're doing orchestral arrangements where you're not using live strings, but there are some high end VSTs that even with a lot of might still take a lot of work, but can get you really realistic brass arrangements and orchestral sound. So for specialty things, then you will need to step up. But for the average Q or mainstream pop or hip hop, or rock kind of song, you can do a lot with stock instruments.
Awesome. And with that, we've come perfectly to time. I want to thank everyone for showing up and sharing this evening with us, this moment. We know everyone has busy schedules, and it's obviously and honestly really great to connect with you all. So thank you. Follow us on the socials. We'll follow you on the socials. Feel free to reach out with any questions. Anything we can do to help, we are happy to do it. Thank you so much for showing up for this tonight.
Yeah, I want to say thank you everybody for coming. Eric, thank you so much for I didn't know how much information you actually had on those plugins, but now I do, so I'm not going to ask that question next time. Sam, thank you for your perspective from the film editing. That was really interesting to hear. Really great to hear your process, and thanks to everybody else. It's really good for me to get this kind of education, and really great to hear the questions. So take care, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This is great.